Joe López is an artist steeped in the culture of Chicano Texas, from the borderlands through the hill country. He is also a successful entrepreneur and promoter of the works of his South Texas peers.
I think if I'm trying to accomplish anything, is just to remind people of where we came from. There's the saying, que nunca se te olvide desde donde veniste. Don't ever forget where you came from. I have beautiful memories of when I was a young boy, and growing up with, you know, the grandparents, and we grew up in at a dairy farm, and although we grew up very humble, you know, but it was beautiful for me, and I just have beautiful memories. So, you know, being a Chicano artist, I think people expect you to paint, you know, gang fights and ugly stuff and brutal stuff and very grotesque type work. But I also saw the beautiful side of being a Mexican American, of being a Chicano.
Throughout his life, Joe's art has evolved from scenes of brutality and strife to those of community pride and moments of simple joy.
You know, I always thought being a Chicano was being a Vato Loco and you know, being aggressive and being mean and tough. And my teenage years were kind of wild. I would go into class and I was painting these real violent things. Years later, I realized what was happening, and the things that I was painting were things that almost every day and every weekend for sure in the barrio, in my life, there was always a lot of violence. You know, growing up, I saw so many beautiful things too. It wasn't all violent. So a lot of my work, that's what my work is about, is everyday scenes, you know, people working. You know, I have people washing clothes by hand. I have people selling fruit, people pelando nopalitos. I tell people this isn't the Joe López story. You know, there's a lot of people that grew up the same way I did.
Influenced by renowned nature artist Raul Gutierrez, Joe began to focus on wildlife. But a comment from Jesus Cantú, or Chista, influenced him to explore his own roots.
After high school, they gave me some art classes through the Texas Rehabilitation Commission. And in those days, I had started painting wildlife. I was doing a lot of wildlife because I had read an article about Raul Gutierrez. He was a Chicano, and I was very impressed. He was an inspiration to me because they had written a whole page about him, 2 pages about his life and his art and stuff. And it was really the first Chicano that I had seen get such publicity. So I started painting wildlife. But then I met Chista, and he said, "Why are you painting that stuff?" I said, "Because I want to." Again, you know, the macho in me, "Hey, don't tell me what to paint, man," you know. And he says, "Well, no, if that's what you like, that's fine. I'm not telling you not to paint it." He said, "But you're a Chicano, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah, I'm a Chicano." "Well, why did you paint things about your culture, about your life?" And I didn't really understand where he was coming from, because I was living this rough life, but I was painting these wildlife.
Joe was born with a physical condition that some may have seen as a limitation. He sees it another way.
Jesse Trevino was an inspiration to me because of the one hand. You know, he lost his hand in the war, and I was born with one hand. And it's completely different. You know, he had to learn to use his other hand, and me, well, I was born this way. So, you know, people think I may be handicapped, but I'm not handicapped.
A trip to Mexico brought back childhood memories that gave him more insight on subjects.
I usually work with from photographs. And, you know, as a young man, I started carrying a camera with me, and we visited Mexico when I got married, and I saw a lot of things that they were like 20 years behind us, and I would see the vendors, and I would see these things that I saw when I was a kid.
Despite Joe's desire to be a portrait artist, he never found success in that area until he visited a particular art gallery where his ability was reaffirmed.
As a young man, I dreamed of being a portrait painter. Of course, that went out the window when I would paint people with bags under their eyes and with wrinkles, and I never painted them nice. And I said, well, can you take those wrinkles off? And can you take, you know, and if they were heavy, I'd paint them heavy. And I had mentioned Raul Gutierrez earlier, and when I was out of high school, I went to visit his gallery. One day I eventually talked to him, and I was showing him my portfolio. And he didn't say much, and he never took my artwork, but he says, you know, you paint people good. And, you know, and that's all he said. He said, but I really don't have any room for any artwork right now. But just that word that he said when he said, you paint people good, that was an education. You know, he told me something.
In addition to his scenes of community life, Joe is also known for his depictions of los gallos, or roosters.
I started painting the rooster, the gallo. People ask me, why the rooster? Why the gallo? And I said, well, I don't know, I'm just attracted to it. And I just enjoy painting it. And mostly, they're almost like portraits of, you know, of the roosters, different roosters. And as a child, I used to see them all over the place.
With hard work and encouragement from one of his favorite artists, Joe learned a different way to paint.
I was already about 28, and I had stopped painting for many years because I'd been so rejected and just kind of gave up. But I read this story about Warren Hunter and how he was helping a lot of artists. He used to have classes on Saturday, and I had showed him my portfolio, and you know, I was desperate to learn more about art. And so, you know, he said he didn't have any room for another student. And, you know, I guess he saw the disappointment in my face, and he said, well, come on in early and maybe we can squeeze you in. But one of the comments that before I left, he says, you know, Joe, you're a good artist. He says, I'm going to show you how to draw with your brush. And then it's how to draw. You know, it's just in my mind. It stayed in my mind, and I was driving home, and what does he mean, draw with my brush? And but you know, just that sentence that he said, you know, it just kept me wondering. And then I realized you know, a lot of times I would sketch out the drawings real good in the, you know, on the paper. And then I would cover it up when I'm painting. So in a way, you know, that's when I realized, oh, that's what he means. You know, why should I draw it real good on the paper and then I'm going to cover it up with paint? He gave me a medium brush, and then a 1-inch brush and a 2-inch brush. And he gave me 6 colors. And I said, well, where are the rest of the colors, and where's my brush for the detail? He said, I just gave them to you. I said, well, where's the white and where's the black? And he says, oh, in watercolor, you don't use white and you don't use black. You don't use black? How do you get the dark colors? I'll show you. And then I said, well, how am I going to do the fine detail? He says, I gave you the brush. I said, but that's too thick. He says, I'll show you how to use that brush.
To keep up with the times, Joe changed the size of his canvas and added oils and watercolors to his repertoire.
A lot of my friends were doing these huge paintings, and I didn't want to stay behind, you know. Here I was doing these 22 by 30 paintings, and I said, I'm going to see if I can do, you know, paint big. And so I started with acrylics, but acrylics to me is like painting a house, like the wall outside, you know. You start painting on one side, and when you get to the other side, this side's dry. That's why I love watercolor so much.
His desire to paint in peace led to a trademark fight with a prominent wine company.
I started Gallista about 5 years ago, actually about 7 years ago. It started off with Puro Gallo. And, you know, I call it the accident because I was just looking for a little space for me to paint, because at home, you know, my wife was constantly telling me to move my little table, or either the yard needs cutting, or, you know, the doors falling down and stuff. And I just needed to get away. And, you know, I found this little studio very reasonable. And then something happened, and I found this other studio, and it was a storefront. And you know, well, I have this big idea of starting a national trademark for an icon that Hispanics could relate to. That was Puro Gallo, you know. Of course, we were sued by Gallo Wine, and it was a big battle and a very traumatic time for me. And, you know, people give me a lot of credit for not running, but, you know, it's like that painting, you know. Outside, I looked like very confident, but inside, I was scared to death, man. I said, hey, these guys are threatening to take everything I own, you know, and we were lower middle class people, would work very hard for everything that we had.
Eventually, the fuss took an enormously positive direction because it led to Joe's creation of a major Chicano art and community resource in the form of his art gallery.
We finally settled out of court, and you know, I could still use the phrase Puro Gallo, but to me it was like a gallo that's tied to a post and could only go so far. So what happened is, one day talking to a friend, he'd seen a picture of all the friends that I had that we were boycotting on the internet. Somebody had put it on the internet, and he said, "Mira toda la bola de indios," because there were a lot of guys that we had grown up together with. And I said, "No son indios, son gallistas." And that day, the word gallista was born. And it's like zapatistas, villistas, we're the gallistas.
The gallery has become a San Antonio landmark and a place that numerous artists can call their professional home.
My son made a statement one time when I first got in my studio, my first gallery. And he said, "Dad, why do you have all these artists here, man?" He says, "You're going to take your clients away." And I said, "I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just real proud to have these guys here. You know, my mother used to say, when you help others, it comes back to you." And that's kind of what happened to me. You know, I started helping these other artists, and a lot of good has come out of that. We learn from each other. Some of them learn from me, and I learn a lot from them.
Joe's artwork is appealing to all demographics because people relate to his theme.
When people see my work, you know, they have like flashbacks. I had a show, and there was this young yuppie guy walking around there. I call him yuppie, you know, he was dressed real neat. And he came up to me and he said, "Mr. López," and he says, "I want to thank you for doing this." He says, "You know, I grew up with all of this, and I had forgotten about it, and you brought it back to me." And he actually had tears in his eyes. And that is very special when people relate to your work and they make comments like that. You know, as far as I'm concerned, I'm very proud of the past. And I think that's what our work, when people see it, they get these memories, and it just makes them so proud of being who they are.
Señor nos dio.